What's up, guys? All right, so today we're going to talk about how I'm actually combining CrossFit and bodybuilding. So we're going to go over a couple examples of movements that are kind of just for CrossFit, or more traditionally just for CrossFit. Some things that are kind of in between CrossFit and bodybuilding, and then just talk about like how I'm adding in bodybuilding specific stuff and how that might carry over to CrossFit, especially, for muscle endurance type stuff. Okay. So one of the reasons that I'm doing this is, look, there are lots of really effective bodybuilding only programs out there, right? But the first thing is that I own a CrossFit gym and I enjoy training CrossFit. And so I want to keep training with people doing the things that I love. The same thing is that I'm not transitioning to becoming a bodybuilder entirely, correct? Right? So in that sense, I want to keep my CrossFit skills somewhat sharp, but focus on preparing for the show as best as possible. So one reason that I think people fail when they enter the gym is because they just don't enjoy what they're doing. Of course, there's going to be hard points, right? So everybody's training plan is going to have kind of tough moments where they have to push through and use willpower. But ideally, we're following something that you're excited about coming into the gym every day, right? So I'm more excited by the idea of combining CrossFit and bodybuilding than I am by just doing a bodybuilding split. Now, the first movement that I want to go over is the front squat, right? So, all right, so this is an example of kind of how I'm thinking about my training, right? So I've got lifting, some of CrossFit is going to go into that, some of bodybuilding is going to go into that, and I'm going to combine those things to create a full body routine every training day. I've got my diet where Brenna, my nutrition coach, is giving me my macros, so I'm making my plan based off of that. And then I'm also thinking about hydration because that's really important. So I have a gallon water jug that has kind of incremented time pieces, so I know that I'm sticking on track and hydrating throughout the day. I tend to have this problem of hydrating a lot in the morning, and I eat in the night, but forgetting to do it in the middle of the day. And then I've got the sport of bodybuilding, so we're hiring a posing coach. I think we found one. We're going to go try her out next week, so I'll have some content based around that. And then I've got research, so I've bought a couple books, I'm watching videos, and I'm actually going to go attend a bodybuilding show before I do it so I can see how it actually works. Visualization is incredibly important to me, and so I want to be able to visualize exactly what's going to happen on that day. And finally, I've got my cardio. So aerobic power intervals are going to transfer better to CrossFit. That's doing equal work to rest or more work than rest and trying to keep it at a sustainable pace across all intervals. And then I've got steady state, which will probably come into play more as I get closer to the meet. My carbs drop even more and I don't have very much energy, but this is just to burn a little bit of extra calories, make sure that I'm looking lean and hard for the day. All right, so now to get into some movements, right? So the first movement we have is a front squat. Now, because of my back injury, I need to lower, slow, and pause, but this obviously works really well with bodybuilding. But this is going to transfer really well to CrossFit, all right? And then I've got GHD sit-ups. Now, again, because of my back, I'm not going all the way down, but with GHD sit-ups, I'm thinking about really engaging my core and making sure that I'm feeling good, feeling in control. This is going to help a lot with ab development, as well as make sure that if a higher rep core flexion, so sit-ups or GHDs or V-ups or toes to bar, something like that, comes up in the open, which is coming up here, then I'm going to be prepared, okay? Then we kind of move into movements that I think transfer to both. So the first one we've got is a bench press. This is 280 pounds, which is about 85% of my lifetime max, but probably closer to 90% right now. Keeping strength up is really important for two reasons during this journey. The first is that I want to make sure I'm staying strong for CrossFit and not just focusing on getting a pump. But the other thing is that as we lose weight, I'm depleting my glycogen stores. And so we may get to the point where if I notice strength starting to drop precipitously, I need to have refeed days, which are higher carb, lower fat, same protein as compared to my normal macros, a little bit more total calories than I'm usually eating. And that will allow me to keep strength high, right? So it's kind of a check-in for whether or not I'm losing weight too fast and potentially losing muscle mass. And then I've got weighted chin-ups here. This is pretty moderate for me, I would say. So we've got a double pause at the bottom and at the top. I've got about 50 pounds added between the vest and the kettlebell. And this is obviously going to target the back and biceps for bodybuilding, but also going to really incorporate some pulling strength for CrossFit, which is super important. And finally, we've got some tricep dumbbell extension work here. So what I'm thinking about here is this is just a bodybuilding move, right? This is not going to transfer directly to CrossFit, but trying to really incorporate a lot of tricep and bicep work because those are my weakest points from a bodybuilding perspective. The biggest thing to think about here is that while these are focused on bodybuilding and on creating a pump, holding on in muscle, maybe even building a little bit more muscle, I want to pick muscle groups that are really important in CrossFit, okay? So some muscle groups matter more in CrossFit than others. The two that I would consider the largest limiters for most CrossFit athletes are going to be tricep endurance. You think about things like handstand push-ups, shoulder to overhead, ring dips, burpees, etc., that have a high component of muscular fatigue. Triceps and that lockout endurance is going to be really important there. And then hip flexors, so the GHDs that we looked at, go over that. Also doing a lot of L-sit work and core work, but hip flexor endurance is incredibly important in CrossFit as well. You compare that to something like calves, which, yes, calves are important for bodybuilding. I'm still doing them throughout the week. But other than double unders, calf endurance is very, very rarely going to be a limiting factor in CrossFit. Most of the movements that we do that are calf specific, like running, box jumps, etc., cardio is going to be a much bigger limiting factor there, okay? Now, I thought this would be a useful graphic. This is basically the movements that I think are kind of specific to bodybuilding, specific to CrossFit, or specific to calisthenics, and then the intersections of those, right? So this is not an exhaustive list. We've got, plenty of things that I'm doing that are not on this list. But in general, I want to live as much as possible in these intersections, right? So lots of deadlifts, squats, bench presses, rows, and overhead presses, lots of push-ups, dips, pull-ups, and core work, and lots of GHDs, handstand push-ups, and L-sits, okay? I'll still incorporate the other things, of course, but you're going to see that a little bit less in my programming as compared to a classic bodybuilder, a classic CrossFitter, or a classic calisthenics athlete. And finally, this is a brief introduction to example day that we talked about those tiers in the last video. Tier 1 is going to be heavy lifting. Again, keeping strength up is important for both CrossFit and making sure that I'm not losing muscle as I lose this weight. Tier 2, sometimes these will be in Metcons if it's a heavier Metcon. Sometimes these are going to be just outside of the Metcon and lifting. And that's going to be your multi-joint movements, your compound movements that are not kind of the big movements. So chest-supported row, obviously, still a multi-joint movement, but a little bit more specific to the upper back. Pause front squats that we saw in the video. Those are going to be a little bit less loaded than like a heavy front squat would be in a tier 1. And so I would count those as a tier 2, but great for developing, strength and power out of the hole for CrossFit. And great for developing quad hypertrophy for bodybuilding. And then tier 3, this is going to be a mix of Metcon movements. So, thrusters, a little bit of quad, a little bit of shoulder, bar facing burpees, a little bit of chest, a little bit of triceps, a lot of conditioning. This is just a Metcon example, but you could also see things like those tricep extensions or bicep curls or calf work or single leg hip thrusts, things like that are really isolating on one body part. All right. So this is just a little sneak peek into how I'm combining CrossFit and bodybuilding from a training perspective. We will have an entire day of training coming up here, as well as a little bit of nutrition content and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments and like and subscribe.